intervention happens. Okay? So, when I talk about mental and emotional pain as well as physical pain, illness and disease, and I blame our actions, so I'm not saying I'm blaming you guys or anything like that, but just the judgments you've given depression. Now, if we were to compare the human brain to the most sophisticated modern day computer today, okay, so the sophisticated modern day computer, what could it do? It can hold 250,000 images, 20,000 songs, hundreds of full-length movies, okay? But let's look at our mind and let's compare it. The human mind can do 10 quadrillion processes per second. Per second. Far more superior than any computer out there. In fact, people don't even understand the human brain. People don't even understand depression because they say it comes from the mind. The mind and brain, control from the brain. So if we put our hands into these so-called experts in depression, say psychiatrists, well, let's look at psychiatry first of all. It's the only profession in the entire world that never scans the organ it's dealing with. So it has no clue about how that organ works, number one. Study any other profession, cardiologists, what do? They'll scan the heart. And I'll talk about the heart in a bit. So depression, no one really understands it. But let me tell you our judgment against depression. Our meanings we've attached to it, according to the NHS, we say it's a psychological illness. Who here believes depression is a psychological illness? You believe it's a psychological illness. Anyone else? In terms of how we've been taught about depression. Anyone here believes it's a psychological illness? No, so NHS call it a psychological illness. If you understand depression, if you looked it up in the English dictionary, how it's described is severe feelings of despondency and dejection. Severe feelings of despondency and dejection just simply mean severe feelings of sadness, misery, low moods, hopelessness, and these are feelings that every single person will go through at one point of their life. No one escapes it. Depression isn't a bad thing. Now, what people say is that their thoughts, they can't control, it's debilitating. But what if I was to prove to you today that every single one of these are in complete control of your thoughts? Would you then believe me that your thoughts don't run away with themselves? If I prove to you today that you're in complete control of your thoughts? Yeah? Now, this isn't taught by medical doctors, psychiatrists. CBT have a good way of trying to make you see things in a slightly different way. Okay? But what most people do in depression is if I told them they would never ever do it on a physical level as what they're doing on a psychological level, and we know the physical body also affects the physical mind. Yeah? So, are we ready to see depression in a slightly different way and to understand the human mind in terms of how powerful it is? And to also prove that we're in complete control if we're conscious of it. 96 to 98% of everything that we do is automatic anyway. So we always default back to the program that we've always been taught, but we've never been taught about the human mind. Okay, so physically, this is what people do when they have depression. If I was to ask you now, when did depression start for you? When did it?
15.
When you were about 15. Okay, what happened exactly at that point, if you want to share? Are you alright sharing?
Yeah, it's fine. When I was at school, one of the lads at school, I went into boots one day, and he just collapsed and died. And I think that's the pinpoint of everything. And then I had quite a few issues, like at home with my parents and stuff. But it kind of, I don't know.
Okay, fine. And that's all it started?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. And then it was just a matter of time in terms of how to overcome adversity, really. That was ultimately what it was. So you're faced with adversity, aren't you? And also you've experienced from such a young age death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was the point of the anxiety as well, and that kind of like.
100%. Okay, so this is one of the most common reasons why a lot of people get depression. and we've called it a psychological illness. And remember, the beautiful thing is about the brain is a lot of the things, when people are in states of depression, the mind goes into a state of depressed. Now, this isn't a bad thing. This is the same feeling of, and most people in depression, if they don't understand it, they would argue this because of what they've been conditioned to believe. Because if you look at the English dictionary, if we believed it in what the definition of the English dictionary made it out to be, then our total meaning changes, and it no longer becomes this other meaning called psychological illness. Does that make sense? So it depends what meaning we're attaching to this. Now, go with the meaning that I've said, okay? Severe feelings of despondency and dejection, severe feelings of sadness, low moods, misery, trauma, right? We're going to go with that. It's feelings. Are we allowed to feel pain? We're allowed to feel emotional sadness. We're allowed to feel it. Are we allowed to feel emotional grief? Is there any time limit on that? Who's in control of it? Us. Okay, so if our experiences have created us, now watch this. If I said to obviously, what's your name, sorry?
It's Lyndon.
Who?
Lyndon.
Lyndon. Okay, Lyndon, let's go with you, okay? We'll take something from this. What we're all going to do, in fact, is stand up for me. This is how depression on a physical level works. For the kids as well. Ultimately, this is where the prevention starts, is with the kids. Now, as you're looking backward, try moving forward. Try moving forward. Keep moving. And how slow we're going before we bump into things. No, keep looking. And we're going to start bumping into things. And no, don't look forward, look backward, look backward, look back. Okay, now, stop. You would never do it, would you, if you wanted to go forward? Ever. But this is what we do on a psychological level. We want to get to there, but we're looking there. It will never ever happen. So it was just an exercise to show you, if you want to get to there, especially on a psychological level, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with depression, absolutely not. But on a physical level, what we do is we're looking too much into the past of experiences that have happened. And most of the experiences all starts off predominantly with parents. That's the first moment we're actually taught about how to deal with authority. So you start authority, I was explaining to you. And this is what then physically takes depression. We come out physically and we go into this state. Does that make sense? So whatever's going on in here, you would never ever look backward, because you can't change. It's a game you're never ever going to win. To change what's happened in the past, no one can do it. But if we now want to move forward in life, we have to now start focusing, and this is where we have to start creating new goals. They say it's a serotonin imbalance. Okay, who's heard this before? Heard this before? It's a serotonin imbalance. Bearing in mind, they've never ever scanned your brain to find out which neurotransmitters are off. Never once have they scanned your brain. Bearing in mind, serotonin is created in the gastrointestinal tract, and the blood platelets, and the central nervous system. But it derives from what's called tryptophan. No one's explained how these happy chemicals are released. The synthetic drugs that they're giving people now have side effects. I'm not against medical drugs, honestly I'm not. One thing I want to say, I'm truly grateful for all of them, but we've got to be truthful in the results that they're producing with people. We're not educating people about their minds. Science says it was serotonin imbalance. Then from serotonin, what they found was more people were committing more and more suicide, and no one was getting better. So they came up with new research, which they said the hippocampus part of the brain, which controls emotion and memory, is smaller in people who are depressed, and it's larger in people who are happier. Then they were still medicating people, because I'm going to explain something in a minute. There's 6 different chemicals that can make an individual happy, and they're only focused on the one. But they never scanned you to see which one was off. So it's all guesswork anyway. Why do you think some people react to it well? Because it might have been, it's all guess, and some people want to kill themselves. There's 6 different chemicals. There's endorphins, there's serotonin, there's norepinephrine, there's brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and we're medicating these people with it. There's also oxytocin. And oxytocin is given to the woman when you find they have high levels of it, is when they give birth. The reason why is because it's to show love, and they're not going to separate, so it increases that love. So really start understanding about what's going on. So when they realized the hippocampus, and I'll show you how we can increase these chemicals. Simple exercise. We don't need these drugs. But we've got to do daily practice of all this stuff. The gratitude list if we want to get out of depression. Especially if we believe it's something that we can't get out of and we've been suffering for years with it. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but it's not a nice place to be if you've been there for years and years and years. I think it's time now to move forward. For a lot of you. Because I'm telling you, you're not going to get anywhere by looking backward and staying in the experiences of what you felt. I'm not saying that's not a bad thing, but also how we're reacting to things and what we've been taught about everything in terms of pain. Emotional, mental, physical, chemical, illness, disease. It's all our self-doing.